cave exploring. She returned with an awful request. There are places in this world where the earth swallows the living. Places untouched by time, where silence is more than just the absence of sound. It's a presence, a lurking, watching, waiting presence. But what if something waits beneath the surface? Something ancient and hungry. Tonight, we follow a tale of descent into darkness, where some who enter don't return the same, or at all. Before we begin, where are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I never understood her hobby. Why on earth would you want to let yourself be swallowed by the depths of the earth when you could? I don't know. Breathe fresh air. See the sky. Be able to move. To walk. The Nutty Putty Cave incident was one of the many stories that had stuck with me, and I hated knowing she was somewhere out there, practically buried alive, exploring some god-forsaken tunnel. I hated knowing that any time I saw her could be the last. I had begged her to pick some other hobby that wasn't so risky. She refused. She'd always talked so passionately about the thrill of it. When you're down there, Jude, she'd start. And I didn't know whether to envy her courage or despise her carelessness. When you're down there, you move differently. You think differently. You're not you anymore, but someone more agile and quiet. Your skin glides smoothly through the rocks, through the guts of the mountains. It's something ancient and full of life. Time just stops, and your heartbeat adjusts to the water dripping from the walls. Your eyes widen and embrace the darkness. And nothing compares to the first breath of fresh air once you're out. Every time she'd try to convince me, I'd cut her off. It's horrifying. You're essentially getting eaten by the mountains, and hope they're kind enough to spit you out. All those tight spaces make my skin crawl. Imagine not being able to take a deep breath because some wall is pressing down on your back. I'd die. Last month, she wouldn't shut up about this new cave system she discovered somewhere in the north. A 5-hour drive, she said. I can't believe I never knew about this. It was so close to us. All this time. My stomach dropped at the thought of her going on one of those adventures again. You know, there are better ways to spend your time. Bullshit. She laughed. Look, I'm safe. I'm not stupid. I wouldn't do it if I had any doubts that I would not return. You should come with me sometime. But I was quick to refuse her, and she just smirked and shook her head. Whenever she set her mind on something, nothing could stop her. She sent me some texts, updates like 2 hours left or the picture of the entrance of the cave. But then the updates stopped. I'd learned to let her do her thing and just wait until she contacted me. And over the years, I stopped feeling so anxious every time she would cut contact for a while. I knew she didn't have any signal down there. I knew to just wait. The last update she'd sent me was around 10 a.m. It was midnight now, and as I tried to fall asleep, something wouldn't let me. I kept seeing her when I closed my eyes, imagining her down there, swallowed by the rocks. I twisted and turned in my bed the same way she did, deep into the ground. My clothes were drenched in sweat, and I hoped she had just forgotten to update me and that she was out of the cave. At one point, my phone buzzed. I shot up and glared at the time. It was a little over 3 a.m. It was spectacular. I rubbed my eyes and felt the weight lift off my chest. Thank God. I typed some shallow response, then finally went to sleep. She came home the next day. At first, I didn't recognize her. Her cheekbones were more prominent, and she hadn't washed herself. She was drenched in mud and smelled of rot. Her eyes were full of life, darting from one place to another, and her hands would not sit still. She didn't speak much. I didn't know what it was, but I assumed something had happened down there that scared her enough to change her mind. I felt relieved. Maybe she'd had enough near-death experiences to finally quit. I stayed in my room that day, mostly working. I heard her walk around the house multiple times, looking through drawers and cabinets, slamming doors. At some point, she stopped, and the hallway went silent. I was sitting at my desk, writing on my laptop. I could see the cracked door of my bedroom leading to the dark hallway, and a fraction of one of our tall white lamps. I was focused on the screen, so everything else was blurry behind it, just some shapes and colors mixing together. It's not like I paid much attention to the background. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I called it a night. I glanced up at the hallway, and something caught my attention. The white, blurry shape of the lamp wasn't there anymore. Did she move it? I opened the door wider and peered into the hallway. The lamp was in its usual place, which had never been visible from my desk. My eyes stung a bit from the monitor, and I knew my vision was tired, but I could have sworn I'd seen something white and still through the cracked door. I even assumed it was the lamp, because it had stood there for hours. Although, if I think about it, the lamp wasn't that tall. I don't even know what to think of that, but I have this knot in my throat as I'm typing this. It's so strange that most of the time, the human mind doesn't register peculiar things as peculiar and brushes them off as ordinary stuff. How many times had I seen something in the corner of my vision and just assumed it was some object, like a plant or a coat, when it wasn't? It made me realize how stupid we are as human beings. If someone wants to watch us, they can do it for as long as they please, and we won't know unless they want to. I turned my head to my sister's room. The door was shut. I wondered if she was sleeping. Carefully, I tiptoed to her door and gently twisted the doorknob. I whispered. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed in the dark, doing nothing. Were you watching me? Watching you? Yeah, I thought I saw. She just stared at me. Then her gaze slipped to a fixed point behind me. She followed something with her eyes. I almost snapped my neck, turning to see what she was looking at. Nothing was there. Are you okay? How's the cave system? Did you have fun? It's different down there. Yeah, I know. It's dark and damp and tight. No. Her voice was hoarse. She was studying her hands, turning them over again and again. Look, I don't like what you're doing. This is just ridiculous. And I don't understand if you just want me to freak out and this is one of those pranks. If you don't tell me what you saw, I'll just assume you're lying for attention. It's really tiring to be your sister sometimes. Doral. Boys. She widened her eyes, still fixated on her hands. I thought she was deliberately ignoring me for a while, until she started coughing. Her cough became clearer and more controlled, until I realized at some point she transitioned into a laugh that sounded painful. She grinned at me, but her eyes were blank. Then, she mumbled something that sent chills down my spine. She'd spit out the words so fast that for a good minute, I didn't realize what she'd said. We were both silent, just looking at each other. I didn't know how to respond, and was beginning to wonder if it was worth continuing the conversation. "You're tired. Go get some rest," I began, but I got interrupted. "You need to come with me, Jude." "Where?" "You need to come with me and crawl under the earth." My chest tightened, and the corners of my vision went blurry. "Stop." She just stared at me. Then her eyes shifted away, out the window at the end of the hallway. I frowned, but before I could turn around to look outside, she quickly stood up and blocked my view. She sprinted to the end and pulled the curtains. "Why did you do that?" "Good night." She went into her bedroom, then shut the door behind her. I pulled back the curtains and stared into the darkness, looking for whatever the fuck she'd seen. The street was empty, apart from a car and a black trash can. Some bushes, my neighbor's house, a bike, the streetlights. I pulled the curtains back. As I stepped into my room, a thought lingered in the back of my mind. It all happened in a few seconds, but it was enough to weird me the fuck out. We only take the trash cans out on Tuesdays, when the garbage truck picks them up. It's Friday. I pulled back the curtains again, and the black trash can wasn't there anymore. Only, I wasn't even sure that's what it had been. When you see something off, your mind automatically ties it to something rational. Some explanation. If I think more about it, it could have been someone crouched over. I shook my head. "Stop. You're disturbed. Go to sleep." As I typed this out in bed, I just couldn't help thinking about what Em had said to me. The two sentences were on a loop in my mind, and they affected me because they weren't coming from a crazy person. And Em has never lied to me, so she really believed what she'd said. In her bedroom, when she'd flashed me her best grin, I discovered what happens after death. You won't make it there. I'm not superstitious, but listen. I knew something was wrong from the moment she'd asked me to come crawl under the earth with her. But I'd assumed she'd had some near-death experience that sent her into psychosis or something like that. I thought she'd forget about it over the next few days, but she only got worse. She started seeing things? Unfortunately, so did I. It started small, not enough to fully set off the alarm in my brain. Just paranoia slipping out. The feeling of being watched. Seeing movement in the corner of my eye. And so on. The worst type of fear you can experience is fear of the unknown. The illusion that things were fine would crack from time to time, like the incident with the lamp, or the black trash can, or, to rephrase, what looked like the lamp, and what looked like the trash can. I think I was too absorbed by my day-to-day activities that I didn't think to look around more carefully. No one ever thinks to look around. I would stare at Em and try my hardest to find out what was going on in her head. She'd wake up in the middle of the night and just stare out the window or refuse to eat. She worked from home, so she was here all the time. Most of the day she'd act normal, but then she'd slip out. 9 days after she told me she found out what happens after death, we were having dinner, and she asked me another question. Do you usually dream? I stopped, my fork halfway lifted to my mouth. What? Do you remember your dreams? Not really, no. I lied. I didn't want to tell her that for the past nights I'd dreamt of her, with her skin stretched around her face and her knuckles white, eyes wide in a curious gaze. The image was the only thing I could remember from my dreams, of her staring at me, and me, desperately trying to say something, to ask her what was wrong. Are you sure? I mean, for the past nights, I dreamed of you. I blurted out. I still don't know why I said it. She blinked, and her eyes darted for a second, somewhere behind me. What was I doing? Staring at me. You looked off. M frowned. Maybe you remember that, because it really happened. I asked if you remember your dreams. I slammed a fork on the table. Stop asking me stupid shit and tell me what's going on. You've been acting weird all week. What was the name of the cave you visited? What the fuck do you mean about crawling under the earth? And why on earth would you say I'm not there after I die? What is that supposed to mean, Em? Did you take something? Did you meet someone there? And please stop staring at some fixed point behind me. I don't know if you do it on purpose or not. Listen. For the first time, she looked uncomfortable. I don't know the name of the caves. What? How? How'd you find them? I don't think they're there anymore. They moved. I stared at her. She was crazy, and yet, illness isn't contagious. If she was truly crazy, I shouldn't share her hallucinations. Or delusions. Or maybe it was a genetical thing. I found them out through a friend. Not even the internet. A friend who always knew the best spots. She said they were safe, and truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience. She sent me the location. I drove north, through the woods, for what seemed like days, with Susan. You know Susan. And then, you know, I saw the entrance, I mean, it started fine, and you'll say I'm crazy. But the silence in the cave was unusual. I could hear the blood pulsating in my ears, and then the heartbeat seemed to rise above me, and became the heartbeat of the cave, imprinted in stone, which seemed to move in sync with my body. We came across this tunnel, where we crawled and crawled and crawled. I was grateful she'd opened up, and for the first time since she'd come home, she spoke freely, even if her voice was shaking a bit. I was trying to hear water dripping, insects, movement, anything. But it was so silent, and my heartbeat was just unbearable. So loud. I assumed it was just the dark and the silence and the tiredness that were making me feel things. Imagine things. Ah. Oi. She was staring at her hands, and her voice had toned down to a prayer, a murmur, almost as if she was mimicking the sound of water dripping through a cave. I've done this for a long time. I knew my limit. I knew my body. I was not afraid. Not even once, because I seemed to fit right through it. Susan was behind me all the time. Right behind me. I could hear her breathing, and we'd talk sometimes, make observations. The tunnel had some sort of a twist where you had to pull your body upwards and then slide through an opening to get to a larger cave. However, after we passed it, there was no cave, just another tunnel that seemed to go down. Her lips were trembling. I began feeling very cold, and a grim thought made its way through my mind, like poison. It couldn't be. Susan said that we must have missed the exit to the larger cave, that we must have taken the wrong turn. The tunnel was now abruptly descending, and I was diving into it head first, my chest pressed by the stone walls that were cold and dark. And believe me, by then hours had passed. No one had told me about this route. My head hurt from the pressure and the blood just pumping into my ears. And my heartbeat was so loud, so loud. Oh my God. And I could also hear Susan's heartbeat right above me. Deafening. In the cold, in the dark. I reached over to her hand, but she pulled away. I believe we descended over 100 meters. I don't even know where we were. I felt her weight above me. I couldn't breathe anymore. I couldn't move forward anymore. I was stuck, and Susan was right above me. I yelled, and I didn't recognize my voice anymore. It was hoarse, unnatural, carved into my throat like a reminder that I used to be human. I wasn't human anymore. I was never afraid. Not one moment. I was just extremely depressed. A feeling so heavy of desolation, of hatred. I begged any god I knew to let me through, and at one point, I somehow slipped into an opening. It was dark, and I was knee-deep in a puddle. I looked up to see Susan's head through the tunnel. She couldn't fit through. She stayed up there, staring at me, helpless. The thought was now so loud it echoed into my head. It couldn't be. I tried finding any other opening. I had no idea where we were. No idea. Susan was stuck there, and unless she broke her ribs or limbs, she couldn't get into the opening. Crawling backwards, up through the tunnel, was impossible to her. It was so weird to face your end like that, because it was truly the end, for both of us. I was dizzy and trembling, and at one point I passed out. My flashlight went out, and I woke up in complete darkness. Susan was awake, and slipping in and out of consciousness, while I was spiraling, hallucinating you, Mom. God, begging to be let out. She looked up to me. Her eyes were red, and little veins around them popped out, violet against her pale skin. Her lips were bruised and trembling. I am not a bad person. My chest tightened. I had a knife in my pocket, and just like that, the grim thought that had stained my mind came to life. No, Dottie, it can't be, but it is. You killed her. Not immediately. I needed to make my way up. That meant doing what was necessary to clear what was blocking my way. That and her heartbeat was so deafening. So fucking deafening. She was so loud, and then she wasn't anymore. Not anymore. I would have never come up with the idea if they hadn't told me so. The people in the cave. The moment she died, I heard them crawling. I heard them telling me the way out, and it worked. I got out. Look at me. My eyes stung from the tears. Look at me. You were there for a few hours. You couldn't have crawled too deep. Rocks. No, time is different down there. I knew you wouldn't understand. The food had gone cold. All was cold and bland. The house was still. Nothing mattered to me anymore. After I got rid of her, I crawled up and slipped through the tunnel easily due to the sweat and water and blood. I crawled and crawled, and then something grabbed my foot. I looked down, but couldn't see anything. I recognized the hand, though. It was Susan's. Her eyes sparkled, and a smile lit up her face. I helped her, Jude. By killing her down there, I freed her. This is the secret. The caves are a gate, a womb, and the earth is our mother. Whatever dies down there never truly dies. That's how we become eternal, by going back where we came from. This is why you should come with me. If you die under the sun, you are gone forever. Down there, we are eternal. I shook my head. My throat had gone dry. You're not you anymore. Listen, I know how to help you. I'm going back. I need to. You don't need to think about that anymore. Whatever happened to Susan was horrible, but no. There's another reason why I need to go down. I know the secret now. I know what happens after death, and they know I know. I either go back down, or the earth will crack open and they'll come after me. They're already here. They're watching us right now. And now, you know, too. I stood up from the table, but she followed me. Don't tell me you didn't see them. They blend in so easily, but not for long. Stop, please. I sprinted through the hallway, and she sprinted after me. Jude, please listen. It's for your own good. I grabbed my coat and keys. She was now running after me, and I didn't want her to touch me. I unlocked the front door and slammed it into her, then locked it. She rattled the doorknob, yelling, "Jude," she screeched. "Listen to me. I can help. I will help. Just listen, please," she cried. I got it into my car. From my driveway, I could see her silhouette at the window. Actually, I'm not sure which one was her. I don't want to know. I drove to my mother and told her everything. We came back to the house in the morning, but Em was gone. Our backyard had a small opening in the ground, enough so that someone could crawl through it. Em has been missing for over 6 days now, and sometimes I can hear her calling my name, a barely perceptible whisper, echoing through the tunnel in our yard. I know you'll say I should move out, but she's my sister, and I don't want to let her rot down there.